I'm sat here in sunny Dubrovnik, currently at the Reboot Develop Festival. So you've caught me in the middle of an apartment, hence the dodgy Wi-Fi. Apologies for that. However, I am super excited to be here because we're going to be talking about the joys of taking back ownership of your mobile user acquisition. I mean, what a fantastic topic. So we've got Bango here. I'm here helping out with the PocketGamer.biz guys. And for some of you who don't know, I'm also a CEO of a living game publisher. And I have a little bit of a legacy because I used to be the original app evangelist for Unity Ads. So this is a topic that's very close to my heart because at the end of the day, we want to make great games, get them in front of great players and see where that takes us. Now, we have a fantastic panel. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a few seconds. But before I do that, we have a bit of hygiene that we need to go through. First thing, you'll notice that there is a chat session on your screen. Please feel free to put in questions and ask as you go along. You don't have to wait. You can put text into there. I will find an appropriate moment to try and fit that in. As an attendee, you need to just click on the right side of the event on that speech bubble to get that chat window. If you have any issues, obviously it should be pretty straightforward, but hopefully once you click on that icon on the right-hand side, that should be there. Now, on top of that, the important thing is really we're going to try and find out and learn from these great panelists. So let's kick off. Lindsay, should we start with you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Good morning from sunny California, finally. We're finally actually going to have a warm day, so I decided to brighten it up a little bit. I'm Lindsay, the head of marketing at Upland. It's a virtual property strategy game. It's also the Metaverse Super app. We're based out of California, and what I lead is the growth and campaign efforts, as well as many other things, but lately we've been a little bit more obsessed with growth. So we work with both Dale and Hagup from Appvertiser and Bango, and I've learned some amazing strategies from them, which I'm excited to share today.
So one question I've been suggested to ask is, what app or game most represents your personality?
So I really had to think hard about this one, and I couldn't figure out what app would match my crazy energy. So I actually am just going to share my favorite app, which is Spotify, because I literally don't think I could live without it. I also love the customized playlist because I live by them as if I was stuck in the 80s and 90s making mixtapes every day. So my other favorite
That's
app,
exactly right. Oh, I know exactly how you feel. Yeah, I'm there. I love all that. Next up, we're gonna talk to Ahmed from EastSide. Do you want to tell us all about yourself and what you do?
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm a product growth analyst with EastSide Game. So I'm more on the data side than actually day-to-day campaign management. And one of the things I've been really working on recently is how to navigate this new privacy era and really navigate the loss of signal. So that's kind of like one of the big topics I'm really keen and enjoy talking about.
Absolutely. And this is something that's close to my heart. We did some work with the Information Commission Office in the UK to help game developers understand how to do best practice for, authentically providing data. Because let's face it, we need data. We need to understand what's going on. We can't make better games without that. So I'm completely with you there. But did you say which app most represented you?
So I have two apps. The first one is a shameless plug. It's one of our games, The Office. I'm a huge fan of the show, and the game is really interesting because it really extends the show in terms of narrative and everything. So I love playing with it. And the second app, I don't know, it might be controversial. I love the Google Podcast app. It's very simple. Its UI is simple. Like it just have all the needs for anything like podcast. So yeah, Google Podcast.
So which of your games was it that you were referring to? I'm assuming it's Lower Decks.
Yeah, Lower Decks. Yeah.
Lower Decks. Yeah. I mean, great game. I think you won a Mobile Game Awards at the
Best Narrative
at the Mobile Game Awards for Best Narrative. Fantastic for you guys. And that was again a Pocket Gamer event that was held last week. Yep. So moving on, Hagup, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and Appvertiser?
Yeah, happy to be here. Hi, everyone. before Appvertiser, I was in gaming for about 9 years, working as a growth marketer, from smaller studios to giant corporations like Zynga. And then in 2020, I started Appvertiser as a growth marketing agency, supporting app developers with 360 growth approach, helping them on user acquisition, ASO, creative production, and analytics. And as Lindsay mentioned, we've helped them on the Upland growth in the earlier years and lately as well. And yeah, happy to be here. And regarding the app, actually, I was checking the apps that I'm using all the time. And funny enough, the app that came out to be the first one over the last month was Google Maps. So I don't know if that's my personality, but I would say I'm a traveler. I've been, as you can see the map behind me, I've keep on scratching the locations I've been. So far, it's 34 locations globally I've been to. And I was literally last week planning my 2 next vacations. So yeah, I would say Google Maps it is.
Fantastic stuff. Right, so that leaves us with Dale. Dale, do you want to tell us all about what you do?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Dale. Yeah, I head up our client solutions team here at Bango Audiences. So we're helping all of the partners that we work with to target their user acquisition efforts based on purchase behavior. So we have billions of dollars of payment data that we help you maximize the return on your social advertising spend. And I can definitely back Hagop for his Google Maps. Every time I've seen him has been in a completely different country. So I think it definitely is a good representation of him.
Cool. And I mean, for me, I was trying to think the app that makes the most sense to me is probably either Battle of Polysopia, which is a fantastic mobile game, which I just adore and spend so much time, I sink so much time into, or probably Slack, because let's face it, most of my life is ruled by Slack. Anyway, so moving swiftly on. Now, the point of what we're trying to do here is, I mean, we could talk about the elephant in the room, which is, well, in fact, you know, I was already talking about it. The fact that data has changed. We now have a big gulf in that data, and it's not just affected Apple users; it's affected everybody, because our consensus of information, the kind of profiling that we can do, is obviously deeply affected by the lack of available information. That doesn't mean that we want to stalk players in any way, shape, or form. It's about understanding what players and audiences and game and app users want out of their experiences. We could also talk about kind of a range of things about how do we get actionable insights so that we can actually perform better and create better experiences and find audiences more effectively. And that's what we're going to try and pull off today. And we're going to explore that for a number of things. One of the first lenses of that we're going to talk through is the experience of using automated ads. So, Hago, let's start with you. What is your kind of? Could you help us define what we mean by automated ads and what it means to you, and how you look at that particular part of the way we do ads?
Yeah, definitely. I think the automated ads, it's literally as it means that you kind of like have less of a control over what targeting you are specifying. So essentially, you're telling the system that I have these KPIs that I want to hit, and according to the KPIs, you go and let it do the job. So as a lot of you knows, Facebook has the AAA, which is their automated app ads campaign. And then Google has the UAC, and TikTok actually just recently testing their latest version of the automated campaign. So what's the benefits, or what's the kind of like the pros and cons of the AAA or automated app ads campaigns is that you're literally just relying on the system or the algorithm to do the job for you. So in a nutshell, you're kind of like losing control over what quality users you're getting. So if you're optimizing for purchases, then you were just kind of set your purchase optimization targets and let the system find the right users for you. Obviously, as you guys know, with the data privacy and iOS issues, it's becoming a little bit challenging. So we're kind of like taking a different approach, where we are creating some sort of like less reliant on AAA campaigns and using the manual based campaigns, where we can create our own segmentation. Why we do that is because we still want to be able to determine what type of users that we want to go after, and based on those segments, we are preparing different strategies on the creative side. So, for example, on Facebook, we're leveraging things like the custom product pages of different demographic, like male audience versus female audience, and with that, we have some sort of a little bit of a control over who we want to go after. And things that we're doing a little bit different is like even experimenting on Google with outside of UAC campaigns. So, for instance, we're using Google mobile web to mobile app, where we are running campaigns with the Google display, Google video, and search ads campaigns. And with that, we have a little bit of a control over who we want to go after. I know we're adding one more stage in the funnel, but at the end of the day, we're going for the ROI, and if the ROI is there and if it's working, we keep testing those options.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it always gets me that they call it AAA, because my brain, as a games guy, thinks AAA means something else, but that's a different side story. But I think that your point there about being bespoke, understanding the audience, and using your insight there is something that the algorithm can't do. Although it's interesting how we're seeing such advances in machine learning, we're seeing such advances in AI. I do wonder where I feel like there's always going to be a balance in that. But anyway, let's Lindsay, with that idea that there's a balance that potentially in there. How engaged are you with the automated ads? I mean, how does that affect you guys?
Yeah, so I think we go through different seasons of when automated ads are going to perform for us and when they don't. And I think now we're really working closely with Facebook on some of their new automatic ad features. So even though we have manual ads, we're incorporating things like DCO, which is dynamic creative optimization, and automatic bidding, to actually get a little bit, still have our hands on the wheel for the actual ad campaign, but identify, from the dynamic creative optimization, it allows us to put a diverse set of creative inside of the campaign, so that the Facebook algorithm can actually serve the ad that is actually the most optimized to that target audience. And what that's allowed us to do is it's really experiment with different types of creative to see what works, and then kind of scale those solutions and figure out, for a while it was Reels that were performing really well, because Facebook was really trying to push Reels forward, and then since that's shifted, the Instagram algorithm has shifted, so now they're really driving more carousels and Reels together. So it means that in a full suite of the campaign, you have 10 different assets in which you can mix Reels and static assets. And when you use DCO, the Facebook algorithm will actually figure out which one is going to be optimized to the audience. So, I would say
that takes a lot of the pressure off or some of the pressure off the design or the planning process, or does it actually make that more intense?
I actually think it takes the pressure off, to be honest. I wouldn't say it makes it more intense. But it doesn't mean, though, that the AAA solution shouldn't be tested again in the future, because like I said, if it's working, it's working. The only issue with it is that, when you're committed to running a AAA solution, and you really have to run its course through a full 30-day cycle. That's the only challenge with it, I would say.
So, you mentioned automatic bidding and DCO. I found it interesting because in my maybe naive brain, the lack of data for me I would assume that would make those tools less useful, because from my understanding was that the accuracy and the use of the data meant that auto header bidding was so powerful, but now I feel like it's less powerful. Am I wrong? Is that you're still finding that useful? Is that right?
I think yes. From the standpoint of at the end of the day, we have to look at a blended approach. You can't look at paid over paid anymore at all. We've experimented with, turning a lot of things off, as Hagop knows, and seeing what's the difference when we turn off a lot of the Facebook ads and then see how organic changes. So we can measure the difference that way. But at the end of the day, ultimately we're all in the same space of kind of flying blind.
No, completely get it. And with that in mind, from your point of view, when you, as the guy who looks at the data for all this, are you seeing any kind of evidence base around the choice to use more automatic bidding or auto placement or at AAA at UAC? What sort of data points are you seeing?
I wanted to say something about like automated ads. Like I don't know if you guys like followed, like couple of days ago there was a bug in Meta, like CPM shut up and like Meta overspent like daily budgets for people, and now they're like trying to issue refund. So that's one of the dangers of like just automating everything. You need kind of like I love like Suford's point that you need stop gaps. It's like, think of it as a nuclear missile launching. Like you want a guy to stop it from launching. Like you don't want to waste all your ad. So I guess that would be my opinion about everything automated. Automation is great. However, we really need stop gaps and we need human intervention when things go bad. And taking a truly blended approach is one way in how analytics, like growth analytics, is looking at things. Because like really just looking at paid on paid will give you very strange numbers sometimes. And you'd be like, you might as well just do like Leitika did and just stop any marketing effort. You're like, okay, I'm done. Let's wait for things to improve. But no, it's like you gotta keep on experimenting, and you gotta really take a more holistic approach and look at everything together. So like the separating organics alone and paid alone, it's not going to be really useful anymore, especially with Android in a year or so rolling out its privacy sandbox.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I mean, for me, it's that when you get those blips, those moments where your ad price goes up, CPI goes up to £12. I saw one with a client that we were analysing, where on a particular weekend it went up to £400 per install, when it was normally like 120. And it's like, what? And we know why this happens. This is just a blip, something screwed up somewhere. But that's why I tend to be very nervous when it comes to kind of campaigns personally. Dale, what about from your point of view as Bango? Where do you see this automatic ads process?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've definitely noticed over the last few years is the reliance that people have had on automated targeting and also broad targeting. I think everyone knows that the costs have increased over the last few years and the platform seems to be forcing people's hands. So when it comes to Facebook, with the CPMs increasing, you're forced to sort of widen your targeting pool because otherwise it just gets more and more expensive to target. So you're forced to just go either broad or through AAA, which, you lose a lot of your control then. But if you keep that going for a long period of time, you become used to it, and they're the campaigns that are just always on, and you just leave them and let them run, and you just lose a bit of control that you had before. And I think this has been driven by the platforms. I think, speaking to some of the client partners at the big platforms, if a client is struggling to get the performance that they need, they're just told to widen their targeting. Go broader. Just don't have any interest or demographic information. Just target everyone and let the algorithm do the rest for you. And I guess it's just another form of AAA. If you're targeting broad and just doing AAA, you have no control. You learn nothing about the users that you're acquiring. So it's a really difficult place to be in when your sort of hand is being forced by the platforms, but it's about sort of taking back that ownership and not letting that become a long-term strategy.
I mean, it sounds to me like that implies attribution becomes even more important because you want to see, what are the sources, having that blended approach. I found it really interesting because we've started to apply mobile techniques in PC games, and it's not perfect by any means, but it's interesting because that's not a space where you assume that will work. And now there are starting to be attribution platforms that will support PC. We're actually starting to find some interesting things there. But I'm finding that I'm also bringing PC techniques into mobile. And the reason why that's relevant here is because we talked about having smart planned campaigns. Well, blending an integrated approach to your marketing, making sure that your messages are relevant obviously I'm focused on games, but if my games activity is integrated into my page activity, is integrated into my social activity, is integrated into my streamer activity, I'm finding that that's performing. I hate to use the phrase, but back in the late 90s, we used to use the phrase synergistic. We're seeing that kind of synergy really starting to have a massive effect. But Dan, I'll stick with you for a bit. What you described, that sticking with those background campaigns, those USC AAA campaigns, running as that kind of like stalwart that keeps going, that I will feel the pain and do it anyway. Does that make you more reliant on automated ads in practice?
I think it's easier to scale up budgets there, and I think that's the biggest problem, is that you can assign a lot of your budget just to something that's always on, and that is like the reliance with AAA. And if you find over time that you're moving more budget away from testing because you're getting lower costs from the everyday always on campaigns, you then find it more difficult to move budget back to testing. And I think that's something that's definitely changed over the last few years, for sure. I think you noticed a lot more different types of testing previously. You do whatever you can to make it work, and now it's just, I've seen people's ad accounts go from having 50 campaigns live down to about 5 because there's less targeting options because you're being forced into different routes. And we've also seen from some of the platforms that they're recommending to turn off all of their campaigns and only run AAA, which it's incredibly risky, and our advice is always going to be not to do that. It's really scary, and you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. If it goes wrong, there's nothing you can do. You're back to square one. You've lost all those learnings and years of optimization. So I think you've got to try and avoid it where you can, but when the platform's recommending it, it's hard to turn away their advice.
It's interesting. So, Hagar, when we were discussing this before, you had a thought on that, particularly around starting. I mean, so do you think we've become very reliant in this, automated ad process? Is it still useful?
Back to what Dale said, as a starter package for testing it for the first time, like on Facebook or Google, I think it works well. You can push it, as Dale mentioned. You get to a point where you cannot drive scale. So therefore, for when you're running like at a scale level, or you're an existing business and you're pushing the growth, it's impossible to only rely on automated ads. So therefore, you got to create some sort of like mix that you could do between the two. Also, the other caveat I would say with the automated ads I've seen as a starter package for a lot of companies that are starting from the beginning is that they get the attribution or the post-pack part wrong. So it's very important to pay attention to understanding how to share the data back so you can feed. So you got to think of it this way, like you're feeding the machine to be able to do the work for you. So if you don't feed them the right information, it's going to be impossible for automated ads to work for you. So that's why you would see this huge inflation in the CPI modes. So yeah, I would say that would be the case, but on the other hand, with like scaled businesses, we use automated ads on an ongoing basis. Don't get me wrong; like it still can drive something for you. It's just it has its own challenges, such as like one challenge is that it'll be like 90% of the budget is going to one creative. So when you have that challenge and you bring in new creative to your machine, it's not working. Then you got to go back to the manual, so you have a little bit of control over where do you want to spend the money on.
Yeah, and I imagine that the one particular creative may, particularly hit on a particular demographic pattern. So all the lessons learned from that won't necessarily apply to the next creative, and therefore relearning from scratch, which is not ideal. So, Lindsay, I mean, how about you? How do you feel about this? Are you finding? Well, it seems to me you're not finding yourself as reliant in this automated process as before.
I wouldn't say that we are at all. Actually, we really stick to manual. I wanted to comment on something that was said though, with regards to 90% of the budget hack up, like you said, 90% of the budget going to one creative asset. And when you're doing global campaigns and trying to reach specific geos, you have a real problem on your hands, because it's like you can only go global, but you are doing a specific geo, because with Upland, we're opening cities as we're mapped to the real world. So when we open a city, a user can come in and buy a property in that city. So if I'm opening London, which is the next city we're about to open, my solution is to put London creative with a bunch of evergreen creative in a global campaign. And then what happens? All of the optimization goes to the evergreen creative. So what do you do? So I think that's where manual ads become really, really important, because it's going to be the only way that you can actually get into the geo behavior that you're looking to drive. I know that Facebook has introduced bid cap. So you can actually quantify the percentage to go to a specific geo, but it requires a change in the API, which of course means dev work. And that's not always available if you're a startup trying to grow on other things faster. So, I would really say that for Upland, we really rely on a mix of manual ads.
That makes sense. So, what about yourself? I mean, do you see this reliance amongst developers, or are you seeing this independence like Lindsay is describing, where the manual is playing out?
Kind of like both. Like, I'll go back to Jacob's point that 90% of a budget will go to like one specific creative. That's really a problem, and it diminishes anything that you want to do with creative testing, because all your budget is still going to go to like one ad at the end, end of the day. So it's like maybe kind of like a year ago we had like way more campaigns. Now it's really like just a few campaigns driving most of the performance.
It seems like it's almost like the tyranny of averages coming out here, where the one that happens to do marginally better outpaces all of the other other options. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Cool. So has campaign performance overall therefore changed in the last 12 months? Do you have any particular kind of view on that?
It's like it really depends. Like some traditional, at least mobile gaming networks that used to perform really well, just like they completely tanked. Especially like I'm gonna pick, especially CPE campaigns. Those have, like for us at least, have not been performing as well as other type of campaigns, and even inside the big networks. They're not like, they haven't been performing really as well as they used to before. So you're clearly seeing a major drop, a significant drop, specifically on the Android front.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So in terms of the sort of campaign performance, Dale, from a Bango point of view, do you see differences over the last 12 months in particular? We hear a lot of talk about the difficulties, but I'd be interested to know what you're thinking.
Yeah, I think historically, there's always been something quite exciting about user acquisition, and there's like the hacker mentality that user acquisition managers have always had to have in the past, of like, trying loads of different things, seeing what's working, and then you hear rumors through the grapevine of like a new optimization or something completely different working really well. And I think that seems to have faded over the last 12 months because people don't have as much budget to spend in testing these new things. And I think it's sort of lost its excitement within the community a little bit, because you don't have as much scope or control to be able to find these new ways of targeting, because you're sort of being pushed to spend more broadly. So I think it's become harder to do, and it's changed in terms of performance getting harder to achieve as well, especially over the last 12 months, more than ever.
Yeah, no, completely. Hang on, what about yourself? How are you seeing that kind of campaign performance profile?
It's absolutely changed over the last 12 months, sorry. And as you mentioned, as I would say, there's two factors.
It's probably changed the last 2 months too, to be frank.
Yeah, it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
One factor I would say, it's obviously the data privacy, which is the elephant in the room, right? Like, we're all aware of that, and that just changed the whole way of how we're looking into optimizing the campaign. So it's becoming a lot more harder in a way to rely on those automated ads when you cannot share back the full picture of what you're seeing from the campaigns. I'll mention later a little bit about maybe some ideas on the SCAD 4.0. Maybe that's kind of like the hope that we are all waiting for, to get back a little bit of control over. And maybe that could be the best new thing for the next 12 months that's coming ahead of us. And the second factor I would say is the consumer behavior. less and less people are on Facebook these days, and more people are on TikTok. So with that switch, we are also seeing a change in the performance and the percentage of the spend. Like when I was 5 years ago at Zynga, 90% or 60-70% of the spend would be on Facebook or Google. Now that's changing. It's like there's a lot more different players in the game, such as TikTok coming out, and then also we're seeing a lot of performance being picked up by video networks like the Unity of the world, or the programmatic network like Moloch or the Mintegral of the world as well. So yeah, there's definitely been significant changes.
Yeah, the space hasn't been lacking in change, has it? I mean, although I think personally, I'd just like if Apple, their privacy request was consistent between Apple apps and non-Apple apps, but that's maybe a bit controversial to say that. Lindsay, what about yourself? I mean, in terms of campaigns, and is everything working exactly as it used to be, or are you seeing
just peachy
to everybody else? Yeah, just peachy.
Just peachy, just amazing. No, I mean, we're, for us, I don't want to say it's harder, but it's kind of harder because we're in the play to earn space. So that entire market has shifted, in addition to the campaign performance completely imploding.
Completely.
So, what we've had to do is, have conversations about what are the search terms behind play to earn, and then metaverse. Obviously on TikTok, we couldn't be on TikTok. So we were like thriving up until November 2021. And then TikTok shut up all play to earn games. So we're like, shoot, how do we react without it? So we immediately turned to Facebook and Google UAC and lived through that into the beginning of 2022. And then, metaverse starts to become less of a search term. The volume is lowering. So we have to figure out, in addition to the campaign performance changing, how is the industry changing? And I think the way we responded is, maintaining, like Dale, and I know this is Hagup's brand, is like hack the system, which is always the mentality to stay hungry with testing different things. So each month, we really plan ahead the 20% of our budget going to testing. That's something that we're really disciplined about doing, which means we might, follow the buzz of the latest DSP that's returning. And people are seeing some scale on. We might go to ASA and figure out how we can scale in ASA, because for a period of time, a lot of people in our space were seeing deep scale in ASA. At the end of the day, we always come back to Facebook, TikTok, and Google and figure out how to get smarter, get better about the creation of those campaigns. I'll add, though, that one of the things, just to take a more holistic perspective, like Ahmed said, one of the things we focused on more is, optimization of the whole funnel. So not just the reliance on just the ad performance, but when they actually come through and register, how can we really maximize the people that do get through from a blended view, both paid and organic? How do we educate them? Because our app does require a lot of education. I think we found a lot of success more with increasing conversion to payer and actually the day one average revenue just through email campaigns.
That makes sense. It's interesting because I've kind of backed off using email, particularly because of the volume of spam and things like that. But it sounds like that is still valid, and reminding yourself that these other techniques can still be hugely valid. I think it's really important. Yeah. Now, I have a question here from Aaron Brodsky. He's asking, with all the app tracking issues, what is the difference in CPI that you observe between iOS and Android? Particularly, how do you tackle that if the LTV is not proportionate to those differences? Does anybody want to have a go at that?
So I would say, first of all, we have a completely different iOS and Android strategy. CPI is a big factor for the quality of the traffic that you're getting. And obviously with Android, you're going to look at more global, so CPIs are going to be lower. So if it's really low, you're getting lower LTV, and you're going to have just an overall lower value user, but a high volume. Yeah. So you have to treat Android very, very differently. Whereas iOS, right now our iOS global campaigns are working better, which is kind of interesting. It's a total anomaly, but you're looking at those CPIs be higher, but then also those are higher value users. So you have to really treat them separately. The other thing that I would say we fell back on was optimizing the Google Play Store and then applying those results to iOS. You really can't do that. You have to treat the optimization of both app stores completely differently.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's obviously the app store optimization is always key, but I think it's becoming even more so because now we're trying to build brand value as in the ads as well. We've got to give every reason for a user to do that conversion on the store page as well. Anyone else want to have a response to that one? Anyone want to make share any kind of views of the differences in CPI versus iOS and Android?
From my side, I would say, yeah, I 100% agree with you, Oscar and Lindsay, on the App Store optimization. Is that's one of the ways to have a control if you're seeing CPI differences. However, if in terms of like what we're seeing in the market, it really goes down to what you are optimizing for. That can dictate it. So, for instance, for clients that if we're just optimizing for a CPI basis, in some cases, we are seeing that CPIs are around the same, like not much of a difference. But when you're optimizing for a purchase and on LTV, obviously you're going to see a lot more difference just because, like an iOS user, usually in gaming, it's like, that this like iOS user has a lot more higher LTV. Hence, the cost of acquiring that user is higher than the cost than acquiring on Android, for instance. So my opinion on that is that depending on what you're bidding for and what you're aiming for, you're going to see differences in the market.
I mean, it does seem to me that what we seem to be saying is the value of being manually targeting allows us to think about each of the platforms in a very sort of specified way. So, but what I'm wondering, I'm trying to turn this into a question. What I'm wondering is, can you treat your automation or user automation by platform differently? Is that a useful method, or are we finding that it's really a case of use the automation for your base outreach and then have specific targeted activity that is manually managed? Dale, do you have a view on that?
Sorry. So go for it there.
Yeah, I was going to say from our side, I think that the more that you can do manually, I think the more control you have. And I think even if you take it from a platform perspective and say we're just going to run automated on different platforms and then compare them, it's going to be really difficult to get data because each platform works completely differently. Like Lindsay was saying, if you try and just copy your Google Play Store and your Apple Store, and they work completely differently. The same way, if you try and copy a TikTok strategy with a Facebook strategy, again, they work completely differently. You can take some things and some learnings from them, but you can't just try and replicate it. So the more aspects of a campaign that you are running manually, the more learnings you can take from them.
Makes a lot of sense. So I think we've got a little bit of time before we hit off questions, but what I'm going to try and do is just talk about like what best practice, what advice you guys have for dealing with these kind of experiences. So your tips and tricks have you learned as a result of looking at manual automation? I think we've heard some of those, but let's start with Ahmed. Do you want to talk about kind of what are the tips and tricks that you think everyone who's listening to this should be paying attention to?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the most important tips and tricks for the past 12 months, and to be honest, the space is constantly changing day after day. So sometimes it's a little bit tough to just follow. Is really to switch to a more holistic view. It's not only to look. I think everybody mentioned that it's becoming harder to manage individual campaigns because of loss of signal, and it's gonna get even harder. I really hope SKAD 4.0 is gonna help everyone. I generally hope so, but it's what we're trying to implement is really kind of have a whole view of what you're running. First of all, know your product extremely well. If your product is running, if your product is not doing okay, you can run amazing UA, you're still not going to drive results. So have kind of a constant conversation between everyone in the team. Don't take UA as one isolated discipline. It's at the center of everything. It's if have constant conversations and really look at like your results in a blended manner and think more like a traditional marketer than just a performance marketer. It's like, okay, the strategy is working, this mix of campaigns are working, all of that. Like be more like, at least that's like what I've been more doing and kind of like advising people, is really think more strategically. You're not just driving performance for one campaign, you're driving performance for the whole game or your whole app.
You're making me feel all warm and fuzzy. That's what I love hearing that. The more we talk about integration of messaging and communication, it makes me a very happy man. Hang up, do you have any kind of tips and tricks that you think that the audience should take from this?
Yeah, since we talked about automated ads, just want, like in summary, not to make anybody afraid of automated ads. Like I think you should still use it, but definitely making sure that you have your settings set up correctly, your postback, your attribution, all of that is correct, because you got to feed the system the right way. For when you're driving scale, I mean, I think AAA or any of the automated ads, we've seen that like it's something that you just keep it there. You can use it for some learning experiences. Like it could be like adding a new creative, or you want to experience of like a different bid type, or increase your budget, things like that. Whereas having most of your energy and your efforts focused on the more of the segment, more of the things that you have manual control over. And the other the tip I would say is that like piggybacking to Ahmed what it said, and then also something that what we learned from the blockchain and from Lindsay with the Upland team is that less reliant on just like performance-based campaigns like last touch attribution. Like you can looking into doing marketing as a holistic, like adding influencer marketing, adding some CTV in the mix, and all of these, combining all these efforts and looking at the performance as a business versus just looking at the performance as like one campaign. And that's one of the ways that we're seeing a lot of success as well.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think, yeah, I mean, I feel like I should add something, but no, nothing to add. That was awesome. So, Lindsay, what about yourself? I mean, how do you feel in terms of the tip, the trick that you would ask people to pursue?
So, two-part answer. The first one is, from the lack of, view and clean attribution, make sure you're best friends with your data people. Like, get to know them and ask them all the questions, because one of the things that we look at is when you start to look at the organic traffic that's coming in and you split it between where they're coming from, iOS or Android, you can start to see some patterns in how you're spending and how it's impacting the organic traffic. Just trying to understand like what platforms are they coming in from. One of the most important things too that we haven't talked about, which would be a whole different topic, is AppsFlyer P360 and how it gives you insights on fraud. So it's questioning your data all the time, especially the data on the MMP, and making sure that you're cross-referencing it with the backend, depending on what platform you're coming from. To the point of performance in the last 12 months slowing down, I would say get to be a better marketer. Zoom out and start to look at the entire funnel. Do a funnel analysis, figure out where the gaps are. If you realize that from install to complete registration out of the App Store, you have a big drop, then you have to address it. There's something wrong with your App Store optimization. If they come in and you're not getting all the way down to purchase, then you have to start to optimize up funnel to see where the other drop-offs are. And I know that those are things that are easy to just say, but if you literally don't do them and address them through, creative, through email solutions, then you're really, it's going to be a hard road.
Completely. And we're definitely getting into the old school marketing, to looking at the whole entire funnel is such a big deal. And I feel like if anything, whilst I appreciate it's frustrating that we haven't got the ability to target with performance marketing the same way we have been able to the last few years now. The fact that it's actually requiring us to think about brand building and community experiences and integrated experiences, I think in the end will be a better experience for users as well, because we'll be creating more authentic experiences, I believe. Dale, what about yourself? What's your tip?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of what Lindsay and Ahmed were both saying about sort of full funnel activity. I think the mobile app industry is probably one of the only ones that has gone on for so long with spending 95% of their budgets on performance, bottom of the funnel activity. And if you look across any other advertising industry, it never really happens. So I think it's quite surprising that it's gone on this long, and it's only now that people are starting to say, actually, we need to diversify our budgets further up the funnel. And, you know, you've started to see it with some quite big app developers running adverts on TV. So I'm sure some people have started to see them. I know in the UK it's becoming quite big. So I think there's definitely scope for people to run more upper funnel activity. It's just a case of convincing the people who decide on the budgets and the returns that they want that it's a good idea. And I think that's the most difficult part at the moment. But I think we'll definitely start to see more app developers doing so over the next year or two for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. We have a whole bunch of questions coming, so I'm rather than going on to the next kind of formal question, I'm going to go straight to the questions in the list. So first up, I've got a question which is: have you noticed specific geos performing better or worse for your UA campaign? And that's come from Stephen Osobeni.
I can jump in on this one. I think from our side, I think one thing that we've found quite interesting recently is that there's always been a reliance on targeting the high LTV countries. You know, tier 1 countries have always been such a big focus. And I think people are now starting to realize, you know, we can only spend so much money and time focusing on these geos before we're going to have to start to, you know, disperse some of that spend elsewhere. So you're definitely seeing some new markets come to light where budget is increasing. I think a couple of interesting ones is like Turkey, Brazil. You know, they're markets that haven't been focused on in the past, but people are starting to see, you know, stronger performance there and more scale. So I think people will start to move more budget elsewhere and not focus as much on tier 1 geos, which should in turn help sort of a more, you know, holistic, broad UA strategy.
Yeah, we did a recent test for a game. We were trying to get game behavior data rather than acquisition data, but we needed a reasonably large pool. So we did a whole bunch of tests in the Indian market, which turned out to be really useful, incredibly cheap in that particular context. It didn't matter that we didn't have the retention, because, as in longer term retention, because the short term retention was enough for us to get a good indication about the performance of that particular function that we're looking for. So yeah, it's interesting. But that kind of takes me to the next question. But before I go to the next question, anyone else want to comment on that point about the specific geos?
Yeah, so for our particular space, I would say that Europe is a little soft at the moment. So we're looking mostly in the US, but paying attention to the economic conditions around the world and paying attention to, like for us in the metaverse, it's really, you know, a lot of the investments are coming out of the UAE and Dubai and Asia. So when you look at that, you have to, as a marketer, know that there's growth potential in those markets, but then there's a lot of things you have to do to prepare to localize, which means translate your app, which good luck pitching that to your dev team, you know, because that's going to take a lot of effort and some time. But if you can really
it's a completely different layout.
Yeah, well, if you can communicate the market opportunity based on the insights that you're finding, then it's worth getting after. The only thing that I would really make sure of, because we obviously look in Brazil and Argentina because we have partners there, make sure you know how much you're spending and what the ROAS and the ARPU for those countries is. You have to stay on top of that, because if you start to overspend in the lower value countries, you're going to start to see your overall ARPU start to dive.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think MENA region in particular is interesting. With Pocket Gamer, we've run a number of events, particularly Pocket Gamer Jordan. They've been doing some work with 966 in Saudi Arabia, and they've got an event coming up in Dubai. And we've seen an incredible growth opportunity in that space. But like you say, Lindsay, it's not just the text and language localization, it's culturalization, particularly things as simple like, you know, if you have a game that's got an avatar, making sure that you have them be dressed when you change their outfits, and little things like that don't seem like that important from a kind of Western cultural perspective, but they're super important when you go into other cultures. Did anyone else want to dive in on the geos, or should we move to the next question? I will dive to the next question then. So I'll kick off with Ahmed. what data source do you rely on for product development?
For basic product development, like you'd rely mostly on your backend data, to be completely honest. It's what you receive, like the SDK you put to really see the behavior of players. It's like you're better off trusting your own data sources concerning retention number, like doing the whole like Fitui analysis of all funnel analysis to see like when they drop and everything. Like some people tend to trust like other like their the MMPs with their data. Take it with a grain of salt, like trust the attribution, even then question it a little bit. But for product development, so really improving the game, trust your own data. It's like make sure that your data is actually correct. For market research, if you're like thinking of doing like a new launch, like a new genre of game, there's so many like resources where you can just like collect intelligence. But yeah,
I tend to agree with that as well. I mean, I think there's lots of value in looking at how you target, the particular variation of the game to multiple audiences and seeing the differences when you've done different tests like that. Like we say, we use that mindset with testing a game, doing a particular game mechanic test through an Indian audience rather than through the kind of typical US audience that we tend to use. But I think at the end of the day, it's about smart understanding of your game. And I think it's the ability to be able to infer that because I am targeting a particular audience, what are the implications of that? So we had to check, did they have the right devices? Did they have the right engagement? And I think qualifying your gameplay data against the demographic information that you can get can be super helpful. Anyway, that's kind of my view. Did anyone else have any other comments on that? Dale, you look like you want to add.
I think just to add to what you're just saying, Oscar, I think it's really interesting when it does come to understanding where your users are coming from as well. And I think this is a big area that we've been helping lots of our partners in recently is, aside from sort of providing new audiences, is looking at what users are doing across a wider ecosystem. So if we're processing payments for the whole of the Google Play Store, for example, we can tell you which users are making payments in casual games, but we can also tell you what else they're doing across completely different genres. And I think that can definitely help sort of frame future development for games, because if you know more about the users that are coming in and installing and playing your games, you can look at different features that you might want to implement into your game that might help with retention numbers over a longer period of time. It might help with higher lifetime values. And I think that's a big area that is worth looking into, is understanding even before they've installed your game, what it is that drew them in and what else they're interested in. It's quite difficult data to find, but I think if you can find it, it's really, really valuable.
I think it's super valuable, particularly when if you pass it through a lens of the mode of use of the particular applications. Because if you think about different apps and different games have different flavors of the way they affect your lifestyle, your kind of your daily routine. And I think if you understand what other things they do, you can possibly work out where your game fits into their daily routine as well. And I think that's an area of game design in particular, but also app design that we don't spend enough time considering, in my opinion. Lindsay, did you have any particular thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I totally did. So I, coming from more of a gaming background to some sense, I really believe in gaming loops and fueling those gaming loops. So I think, from AppsFlyer, actually, in really analyzing the events that users naturally progress through down the funnel, you'll see that there's a certain flow that creates that first game loop before you go deeper into the funnel. And when you're bold enough to show those insights to the development team and start to make, data-oriented suggestions on Fitui, then you're having a real conversation about a better and more optimized onboarding for the game at large, which makes email less heavy because you know that your game required so much education. So it's a hard conversation because, obviously the game developers don't ever want to hear from the marketers, but there's definitely some strong insights that a natural propensity for events that a user does without, trying to change their behavior can change the way Fitui looks. And that is a game changer. And we've seen that recently at Upland for sure.
It always breaks my heart when I hear people like saying that, Lindsay, because I think, us marketeers, we're trained to
Yep.
think about putting, getting the best experience for the audience, and understanding and identifying, satisfying consumer needs is the heart of what we're supposed to be doing. And guess what? Understanding, identifying player needs is the heart of what game design is supposed to do. So we should have common ground.
Right.
I like to think.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are coming very close to the end. So I'm going to thank everybody for the questions. I haven't got to the TikTok question, but I can see that Hang Up and Lindsay, you've been answering and responding to that in the text chat. I'm gonna be cheeky with only a minute left. I just ask you all, what's the sort of one thing you want people to take away from this? So I'm going to start, Dale. I've got you my top left. So Dale, what's the one thing you want people to take away from today?
Yeah, I think it might be coming from a sort of biased view working at Bango and Bango audiences, but I think looking into sort of payment behavior and like true payment behavior, everything that we see internally is based on truth as a payments processor. And I think there sort of has to be questions raised about platform-based interest targeting. I think people are very trustworthy of platforms like Facebook or whatever it might be, that when you're trying to search for people who are interested in casual games, for example, that they are actually the users that you're targeting. It's a very loose term that Facebook tell you. They're very secretive about how their algorithms work. So knowing if what you're trying to target is actually what you're getting, we're very trustworthy of that. And I think sometimes, bad data might be more harmful than no data. And if you're framing a lot of your development or a lot of your targeting on what you're being told by platforms, if you see that a puzzle interest audience works best for you, if you're not actually targeting a true puzzle audience, you might be framing a lot of your development around the wrong or bad data. So I think a key takeaway is try and use as much truthful data rather than inferred or, algorithmic data as much as you can.
Well, actual data as opposed to inferred. I totally get it. Hang on, for yourself, what's the one thing that you think people should take away?
Yeah, take control as much as you can. So keep testing and explore versus relying on machines. If you're going to go that route and rely on machines, have the right mechanism in place to feed the system the right data, using the ATT prompt, for instance, on the iOS side of things to get a little bit of a bigger pictures and use that as an indicator of like how your campaigns are performing. So keep testing and gain control over your marketing initiatives.
Take back control sounds like someone should use that as a political line. Oh wait, that got us into trouble in the UK. So Lindsay, what's your actually have I done argument? Let's start with Lindsay. Lindsay, you tell us what's your one thing. Sure.
I would say zoom out and do a funnel analysis. Figure out where the gaps are. Figure out like if we're running a little blind on the campaign performance, then you can take back control of what you can see, which is your full funnel. And if you see there's larger gaps than there should be, then your bigger problem is funnel optimization, which is where you're going to meet growth and life cycle and product together. And that's where teamwork and magic really happens.
I love it that you said life cycle in that sentence as well. I'm getting all of the words that make me happy, because I think we don't spend enough time talking about the player life cycle, the user life cycle alongside acquisition, because retention is so important, and it often gets underestimated. From your point of view, what's the one thing that you would like to add here?
I'm gonna echo Lindsay a lot here. It's really put UA at the center of your thinking, but connected with other departments, and really think about your product, whether it's a game or any other type of product, as a whole, as a life cycle thing. It's like you're gonna bring the user, and then the user enters, and really optimize for all of that.
I mean, I think this is fantastic. I mean, what we're basically saying is the automated tools can be great and they can help you experiment, but in reality, we have to look at our entire funnel. We have to look at the life cycle of our game. We have to be able to deliver strategically, appropriately for the audience, and that audience is not necessarily a vanilla one flavor to rule them all. There can be segments, there can be needs, there can be different targets, whether it's device-based, experience-based, or whatever. What I find really important from it as a game publisher is to put the community experience, the player experience at the heart of that. And that means, as Ahmed said, putting UA in with that mindset where we have consistency between the game, the player, and the branding. And getting that consistency delivered effectively, targeted well, is the way that we're going to make this work. And currently, we can't rely on HAL to do it all for us. We have to find ways to make sure that we optimize for our game, not for every game. And on that note, I would like to thank my panelists for what amazing contributions. Thank you, audience, for your great questions and your support. On behalf of the Pocket Gamer team in particular, it's been great to work with the Bango folks on this, and great to have you all here. I think that's us done. So thank you all for taking part. I trust that that's as usual. And as Lindsay's just pointed out, if you want to catch up with her, feel free to do so. I'm sure you'll easily be able to find the rest of our speakers. Obviously, feel free to post away. And again, thank you very much for taking part.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day.
Have a great time.